And as we're waiting for people to write stuff down, I wanted to also highlight, this idea of as we're reflecting on our own practices and thinking back and moving forward, I think that's really helpful to, say, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure many of us in the room have, and I'm pretty sure I have too, used these terms because, we might not have thought about it, right? And that's also how we were socialized into the field, right? All these things. And so as we work to move past that, I think it's a helpful way to really get models of how to do that and that it is possible. We're not stuck just because we did it that way. So thank you so much for that. I think it's really important.
Sure. And understanding that we're socialized into the field and the power that has had on the ways we have historically thought about things reminds us of the power we have to support the socialization of new generations of scholars in whatever way we choose to.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Right. It's like identifying that a lot also is the solution. That's really inspiring. So a question, fascinating topic. Thank you for sharing.
Mm.
How do you purpose clarifying expectations for participants without writing an entire essay? Recruitment flyers do not have a lot of space. These requirements can be quite long. And how do we expect lay people to understand them? Further, when describing language experience in small communities, what does confidentiality look like? Thank you for your talk.
Fantastic. I love these questions. And in part because I just don't have a good answer. And I can take a stab at it. And I can tell you that in our lab, we have been grappling with this, as have many labs. How do you say we want people who are full language description to participate in our study? I think that there are, first of all, I would actually encourage everyone, and we have definitely been moving in this direction, to think more carefully about like these standard exclusionary criteria that we've used. So for example, I removed it from the quote that I provided for y'all from an article because I didn't want to get off track on that. But I think it said something like normal hearing and something about a very tight age range. And the question is, and that's why I think it's important to think about populations, right? Like, do we really want to test only people who have normal hearing, whatever that is? And do we really want to exclude people who don't, right? Or who actually exhibit the range of human characteristics? Or do we want to be more expansive in the ways we think about groups of people? I think it's really interesting that the titles of our articles don't ever say things like, yeah, thanks. The same. It's the same for me. So like, do we really want to exclude people from our research who actually represent the population of people? And when we have a title to an article, do we ever say things like, the way that English speakers who only have hearing within this range and are only 18 to 22 years old, and right, like we don't say that. We say English speakers and we call it good. But it turns out that we're actually being far more exclusive than that in our research. So just thinking about like, who are the people we want to characterize? And like, who are the populations deserving of our study? And who is it that we really want to study? So I think that that pushes us in one type of direction, which is the expansiveness of it actually makes it so we don't have to be as specific. The other thing is, if what we want is people who have spoken only English from birth, we can say, we are looking for people who have spoken only English from birth, right? And oftentimes that's what we mean when we say native speaker. That's what people often mean, right? And so that doesn't take the paragraph, right? That takes just a few more words. But yeah, we're always navigating this like just popular assumption that native speaker means something. And our interest in engaging members of the public who have that assumption, right, and attracting them into our research, while also following our own values and being scientifically responsible at the same time. So I think there's not an easy answer, but that's why I would love it if we all just started putting our materials into public repositories, linking them to each other, right? Using Role Collective as a way to tie this work together, so that we can work through it. Like, I don't think I have solutions. I think I have hypotheses. Thank you so much for that question.
Yes, thank you for that question. As again, people are sort of writing and thinking, we can I can make a plug for that Chung et al. Paper, where we have some suggestions for how to like maybe rephrase like recruitment questions. And so this is something, actually, Loretta is in the room here. We're trying to also look at people who self-identify as English as the primary language on like Prolific or other recruitment platforms and ask Loretta's doing that analysis right now of like, who are these people actually, and how representative are they of like who you really think they are? So watch out for hopefully some work on that soon, because we had these same sort of challenges. And when I'm trying to figure out what's going on with English adjuncts or whatever, that's my population, right? But who is that? So yes, thank you. Oh, there's a question or a comment in the chat. I've been thinking so much about those issues of exclusion. Why isn't it more accepted to study the language of a community, whatever that looks like, whatever variation? When you're researching a phenomenon and recruiting from a regionally narrow population, that might be a way to be more inclusive. Sorry for the rambling. And Antrista says, I'm working on an article where I really want to say that I've studied my language phenomenon in and around Irvine in Southern California. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Here's some questions in the Q&A. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You can respond to that, and then there's Q&A.
No, go for it.
So thank you for this excellent talk. I'm 100% for more expansive approaches, but practical question. Yes. What does this mean, however, for necessary sample sizes? Does this put, quote, high quality or, quote, high impact research outside of the reach of those without big research grants?
Molly, I'm so glad that you're bringing this back to like access to researchers and implications for those with and without resources to be able to do this well. I think that I don't have an answer to it. And I think that this is a conversation that we all need to be having to figure out how to think about it. So I think what you're suggesting is that more inclusive definitions or more inclusive populations and sampling can lead to more statistical noise, which leads to a need for higher ends. And if that's what you mean, I am in complete agreement with you. We are definitely finding that we need many more participants now that we have opened up our research, and it does put pressure on the funding situation to require so many participants. And I think there's a real challenge to equity and there's a real pressure against doing so in research. I'd be really curious what others in our field think about that, and how we think we should move forward with respect to that. How is that for a non-answer?
Molly clarifies in the chat, I wouldn't want to call it noise, just increased variance, right?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I used a word that that is super problematic, and I appreciate that reminder.
So here's another question. Thank you for a very interesting talk about the complexities of the replication. I appreciate that these changes you suggested are critical and one that will help avoid harmful ideologies in replication. However, I'm wondering about the construct of replication itself, which is typically the characteristic of a positivist research. Yes, multilingual communities are hugely complex and diverse. Isn't this an inherently Euro-American way to think methodologies that center replication can only make good science? if you come from a critical decolonial lens, it automatically appreciates the variability of the population and accepts the divergent ways in which reality can exist without needing to replicate one experience or another. In other ways, could we think beyond methodologies of positivism/replication to other ways of understanding or conducting research?
Yes, and I'm so grateful to you for bringing up this absolutely critical point. One thing I didn't acknowledge in my own positionality is my perspective and my training and the way I have been socialized as a scholar. I do believe in the value, and I believe there are harms associated with positivist research. That orientation to scholarship is only one of many possible ways of learning about the world and of interacting with the world. I absolutely think that it takes a community of scholars who respect each other's research traditions and, importantly, are critical of each other's research traditions for us to do what we mean to do, which is understand our experience better, but also without doing harm. So yes, I am in complete agreement with the concerns presented, and I'm really grateful to you for bringing those up.
Yes, thank you. This is as you know, we have collaborators in our group that are coming from really different disciplines and different perspectives in this exact way. So it's been interesting and helpful to learn from each other. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the amazing gifts of a collective like this, is that we actually do get to talk to each other. I'm curious if anyone's done replication and come up with this same challenge. I mean, I found it pretty amazing that we were in the position of justifying to a reviewer our own criteria when the criteria of the original had not actually been spelled out. So in imposing our own values through the criteria that we used, we exposed ourselves to criticism and claims that we didn't match what the original study had done, except there was no way of knowing. Right. And the reviewer, like, I'm not demonizing the reviewer in this case. Like, the reviewer was doing what they've been socialized to do, which is make assumptions about what these terms mean, and not necessarily question them.
Yeah. So Anna Teresa says you should write a paper about that experience. Agreed. And I'm curious, actually, Rachel, to hear about your experience as somebody who's an editor or has been an editor, and what the role of the editor is as we think about interventions and spaces where where we can make changes. So I'm curious if you have things to think about with that. Yeah.
So at the journal where I was editor, it is the associate editors who do the absolute bulk of the labor and interaction with the authors and reviewers. So I need to acknowledge that first. But I think that as like literally gatekeepers, right? The role is literally a gatekeeping role. What we're responsible for is assembling teams who are mindful of the potential harms of these kinds of characterizations and push back in ways that are comfortable for them. And I think that the comfortable for them part is an important one, because if you believe, as I do, that editorial teams should be made up of people from a variety of backgrounds and career stages, this means that different people are in different positions to be able to enforce these kinds of new ways of thinking. But absolutely, I think that the one way that we can affect change is through policy, right? And we can actually, those who have the institutional professional power have an obligation to at least think about the ways that they can implement that within their scope of power.
In the chat, Laurel Bream says, I'm working on a replication study now where we are faced with a quote normal hearing problem. Glad you're talking about it.
Right. Yeah, normal hearing.